Today we're going to learn how to make darts. Why? Because darts are awesome. Darts are used to provide shaping to a garment, transforming a flat piece of fabric into a three-dimensional object that fits our three-dimensional bodies. Darts are used all over the place in garments, but they are most commonly found around the bust and also around the waistline. As you get more advanced in your sewing journey, you may find yourself wanting to learn how to adjust a dart in a sewing pattern so that it more perfectly fits your unique body shape. But I believe in taking things one at a time, so today we're going to start with the fundamental skill of dart construction, making the dart just as you found it in your sewing pattern. Cut your pattern along your chosen size lines and lay it over the wrong side of your fabric, as you usually would when using a pattern to trace and cut fabric. Find your bust dart on your pattern piece, which will appear as a triangular wedge along the edge. Locate the parts of your dart. Every dart has two lines that start at the edge of the garment. We call these lines legs, and those two legs eventually join at a point we like to call the apex. In sewing patterns, a circle is used to mark the apex, and one or more circles are used along the length of each leg. It can be confusing because patterns typically contain marks allowing you to make multiple sizes, and the lines and dots for the various sizes tend to overlap and just get squished together a bit. Take a close look at your pattern and carefully identify the parts that are for your size. Now it's time to transfer your circles to the wrong side of the fabric. Do not shift your tissue paper during this entire process. I like to use a purple disappearing ink fabric marker to mark these circles, rubbing my marker in a circular motion over the tissue until it dissolves, allowing me to write straight through to the wrong side of the fabric. This marker is fabric safe, so it will wash out with water when you're done sewing. Next, let's draw in the legs of this dart. Remove the tissue, and I like to darken the dots at this point. And then line up your ruler between the apex and the circle or circles of one of the legs. At this point, your ruler should be hanging off the edge of the piece you're working on. Draw a line from the apex all the way to the edge of the garment piece. Then repeat the process to mark the second leg. As you may have noticed, I actually put away my marker for this part and picked up some tailor's chalk instead, choosing a color from my box that shows up well against my fabric. When it comes time to put this dart together, you're going to want to clearly see where the dots are versus where the legs are, so it's extremely helpful to use a different color marking method to mark those legs. Optionally, to help you line up the legs later on, make a tiny snip with the tip of your scissors at the raw edge of the fabric where each of the two legs ends. Once you're done marking the first dart, flip your fabric over to the opposite wrong side and then lay the tissue paper over the unmarked fabric, carefully lining up all raw edges of fabric to the edges of the tissue paper. Proceed to mark the second dart exactly as you marked the first one. Focus on making your second dart look exactly the same as your first dart. Do this to avoid ending up with a lopsided chest area. It's not something we typically want, unless you're going for some kind of avant-garde design, I suppose. You can achieve good enough symmetry by individually marking each side with the tissue, as long as you make sure that the tissue is lined up the same on both sides. Take one of your darts. Lay the fat side of that dart over your left index finger and use your right hand to pinch the apex so that you end up with a dart folded roughly lengthwise. The dart should be folded with the right sides of your fabric touching. Remember those little notches we made at the raw edge of the fabric where the legs end? I'm bringing those together to help me align the raw edges of the fabric where the dart is folded. Now grab some fine, small-headed pins and start pinning. First, we're going to match and pin the 2 circles along the bottoms of the legs. Poke the pin from the top down through both circles, and I'm making sure that the pin goes exactly through the center of both circles. The fact that we mark the circles and legs in different colors is paying off at this point because it helps us clearly see where those little circles are. When you've got the pin going straight through the center of each circle, flip the head of the pin up so that the point is resting behind the dart, and then poke the pin back up through both layers of fabric. Next, we're going to pin the apex into place. This time, I want you to poke your pin a little to the side of the apex, away from the folded edge of the dart. Poke the pin down through both layers of fabric, and then pivot the head of the pin down this time, poking it through the back through 1 layer of fabric only, so that the tip is now sandwiched between the 2 layers of fabric. Finally, I want you to drive the tip of the pin straight up into the center of the apex. The pointy end of your pin will now be hanging off the edge of the dart, right through and away from the folded edge. Now we finish by taking a bunch of pins and matching and pinning the 2 legs together through both thicknesses of fabric. I use many pins at this stage to line up those legs perfectly. This provides greater precision and control at the sewing stage and enhances the overall quality of the resulting dart. Insert each pin straight down through each layer, checking each time to make sure the pin is going straight through one leg and coming straight out on the other side through the other leg. If the pin is not coming out straight through the second leg, remove the pin and try again. When you're done with one dart, pin the other one. I'm showing you some of my footage from pinning the second dart, since I felt it would help to solidify your understanding of the process to see it again from a slightly different vantage point. But to make it more exciting, less monotonous, let's change up the music. No, I'm thinking more exciting than that.
Oh yeah.
Pin the apex! Now pin the legs, ooh, whoa, yeah! Come on, how many other sewing teachers do you know who will sing metal music to you very badly? Admit it, none. Now it's time to take one of your darts with the fat side of the dart in your left hand and the end with the apex in your right hand. Lay it on your sewing machine with the round heads of the pins and the folded edge of the dart positioned towards the right. Drop your needle right on top of the top leg near the raw edge of your garment, backstitching to secure, and then you're going to want to carefully stitch right on top of that line all the way down to the apex, stopping to remove each pin as you go before your needle hits the pin. I'm using a straight stitch to do this and using a regular stitch length. Stitch down the line and then skim right off of the folded edge as soon as you reach the apex. In an ideal world, when you remove your project from your machine, the very last stitch you made should be secured to the center of the apex. For maximum control, I always leave the last pin in when sewing over the apex. It's very important when you remove your project to leave your threads at the apex long, but you can go ahead and trim up the threads at the fat end. Now, I want you to use a pin to tease apart the twisted long threads at the apex, and then secure the threads at the apex using a series of 4 simple knots. The first one should be precise but very gentle, going all the way down to the apex while avoiding any pressure that could threaten to distort the shape of the apex. Tie a second knot on top of the first one, using a little more pressure, a third knot that uses a little more pressure still, and a fourth knot that uses quite a bit of pressure. If you feel the threads slipping or if you see the apex of the dart scrunching up, you're using too much pressure. When you've got your knots in place, snip close to the end of the knot. Stitch and tie the second dart exactly as you did the first. Almost done. At your ironing station, press each dart flat along the length of its crease. Lay your garment flat in front of you with the wrong side facing up. From the wrong side, each of your darts will look like a little flap of fabric sticking up. Looks a bit like a sundial, right? That's how we know it's time to press that flap down. We're going to want a tailor's ham on hand for this step. But first, let's figure out which way to press that little flap. Our choices are up towards the neckline of the bodice or down towards the midriff area. We are going to fold and press that flap down towards the midriff area. One way we know to do this is that our pattern instructions tell us to do it that way. always check the pattern for directions on which way to press the dart. But conceptually, I also want to highlight that it would just look wrong if you were to fold the fabric in the other direction. Look what happens when we fold the flap up. The edge juts out past the raw edge of our bodice. No good. With the dart folded down, the edge of the dart lines up beautifully with the edge of the bodice. As you iron, gently stretch the dart over the tailor's ham, sliding the fabric around until you find a good match between the rounded contours of the ham and the shape of your dart. Press firmly. You want that dart to be as invisible to the eye as possible. Dedicate special attention to the apex. You want that area to be smooth as can be. Press both sides of each dart for a perfect finish. And when you're done, your darts should look something like this. Hang them up on a dress form for all the world to see. Now that you're a clever thing that knows how to make perfect darts, please hit the thumbs up on this video if you feel so inspired, and while you're at it, subscribe to my channel for more sewing tutorials in the future. If you have questions or wish to reach me, comment below, or you can find me on Instagram or by email as shown here. I'm Eliana, and it's been my pleasure to share my best sewing secrets with you. Just don't tell anyone, okay? This is between you, me, and the internet. See you next time.